With James Harden recently getting traded to the Brooklyn Nets, ending an 8-year run with the Houston Rockets, I decided now would be a good time to discuss James Harden's career in Houston. So in today's video, I will be discussing every season of James Harden's career in Houston and coming to the conclusion whether his run was disappointing or not. But before we get into the video, I ask you to drop a like on this video to help my channel grow because it would mean a lot. Subscribe to my channel to help me reach 700 subs before the end of January, and comment on this video to start a conversation with me because I respond to all of my comments. And play that intro. In the 2012 offseason, the OKC Thunder were coming off an NBA Finals appearance led by their three young stars in Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden. Many assumed they would return to the finals. The Thunder wanted to re-sign Harden, and also Harden wanted to re-sign. But when Harden was offered a 4-year, $52 million deal, most assumed he would take it, but he declined, requesting a 5-year, $60 million deal. But the Thunder couldn't give Harden that contract without going into their luxury tax, as they had given Russell Westbrook a 5-year max contract and Serge Ibaka a 4-year, $48 million deal. So with Harden not re-signing the extension, OKC would involve themselves in a trade that would send James Harden to the Rockets and Kevin Martin, Jeremy Lamb, and 2 first-round picks, one of them turning into Steven Adams, to the Thunder. At first this was seen as a solid return for Harden, but Harden would quickly prove that he was worth much more. As soon as James Harden arrived in Houston, he would sign a 5-year, $80 million deal, and he would be joining a Rockets team that was in need of talent, as their best player outside of James Harden were players such as Chandler Parsons, Jeremy Lin, and Omer Asich. And with the bad talent around him, Harden would still lead his team to the playoffs, and the Rockets would go 45-37, finishing as the 8th seed in the tough Western Conference. In his first season in Houston, Harden immediately showed that he had star potential, with him averaging 26 points per game, 5.8 assists, 5 rebounds, shooting 43% from the field and 36% from 3. In the first round of the playoffs, they faced the number 1 seed OKC Thunder, but lost in 6 games, with Harden struggling, averaging 26 points per game and 6 rebounds, but shooting 39% from the field and 34% from 3. After the season, it was clear they needed to surround Harden with more help. In the 2013 offseason, the biggest free agent was Dwight Howard, who was coming off a disappointing year in LA where he was injured most of the season. He surprisingly signed with Houston to pair with their future superstar in James Harden. He signed a 4-year, $88 million deal, and going into the 2013-2014 season, the Rockets were seen as dark horse contenders in the West. In Harden's second season in Houston, he led them to a 54-28 record and the 4th seed in the Western Conference, averaging 25 points per game, 6 assists, 4 rebounds, shooting 45% from the field and 36% from 3. And going into the playoffs, Houston was viewed as a contender to make the finals. And in the first round of the playoffs, they would face the number 5 seed Portland Trail Blazers, and they would lose in 6 games. And in Game 6, this iconic shot would happen.
8/10 left. A 3 wins the series. It's Lillard. He got the shot off. Lillard, good! Good! And the Blazers win the series for the first time in 14 years!
In this series, Harden played terrible, averaging 26.8 points per game, 4.7 rebounds, and 5.8 assists, but shooting 37% from the field and 29% from 3. Seeing how the Rockets barely lost to Portland, the Rockets decided to only sign Trevor Ariza over the offseason. In James Harden's 3rd season in Houston, the Rockets would have their best season since Harden's arrival, with Houston winning 56 games and finishing with the 2nd seed in the Western Conference. Harden was in the MVP conversation this season as he averaged 27 points per game, 5 rebounds, and 7 assists while leading his team to the second seed in the tough Western Conference, while Dwight Howard only played 41 games and Patrick Beverley only played 56 games. But Steph Curry would win the award. In the first round of the playoffs, the Rockets faced the number 7 seed Dallas Mavericks, and he made quick work of them, defeating them in 5 games. In the second round of the playoffs, they faced the number 3 seed LA Clippers, who still had Lob City together, and when the Clippers went up 3-1, most believed it was up for Houston. But Houston would make a 3-1 comeback, but surprisingly, it wasn't because of Harden, as during the comeback, he averaged 26 points, 7 assists, and 6 rebounds, but shot 35% from the field and 23% from 3. But nonetheless, Houston would advance to face the number 1 seed Golden State Warriors, led by the MVP Steph Curry, and they would lose embarrassingly in 5 games. In the series, Harden would average 28 points, 7 rebounds, and 6 assists while shooting 46% from the field and 42% from 3, so it wasn't his fault that they lost. The Warriors were just too good, but it did feel like Houston missed on an opportunity to make it all the way to the finals. In James Harden's 4th year in Houston, the Rockets had their worst season since Harden's arrival, only having a record of 41-41, and only the 8th seed in the Western Conference, which was very surprising since most of the roster was healthy and the same as the previous season. Harden had one of his best statistical years of his career, averaging 29 points, 6 rebounds, 7.5 rebounds, shooting 43% from the field and 35% from 3. And going into the first round, they would face the 73-9 Warriors, led by 2-time unanimous MVP Steph Curry. And Houston would lose in 5 games, despite Curry only playing 2 games and less than 40 minutes combined in the whole series. Harden was okay in the series, averaging 26 points, 5 rebounds, 7 assists, shooting 41% from the field and 31% from 3, and going into the offseason, Houston knew they had many moves to make. In the 2016 offseason, the Rockets parted ways with Dwight Howard, and he signed a 3-year, $70 million deal with the Atlanta Hawks. They signed sharpshooter Ryan Anderson to a 4-year, $80 million deal, and sharpshooter Eric Gordon to a 4-year, $53 million deal. The Rockets had now constructed a 3-point roster around Harden, with shooters like Trevor Ariza, Eric Gordon, Ryan Anderson, and Patrick Beverley, with a good defensive center in the middle in Clint Capella. So Houston was looking like one of the best teams going into the 2016-2017 offseason, and their team fit perfectly alongside James Harden. In James Harden's 5th season in Houston, the Rockets had a very good season, having a 55-27 record and the 3rd seed in the West. Harden had an MVP level season, averaging 29 points, 8 rebounds, and 11 assists, shooting 44% from the field and 34% from 3. And I honestly believe he should have won the MVP over Russell Westbrook, who had only a slightly better stats but had a significantly worse team record. But going into the playoffs, Houston was seen as a team that could potentially beat Golden State's super team, since Houston had enough offense to counter Golden State. Going into the first round, the Rockets were facing the number 6 seed OKC Thunder, led by the MVP in Russell Westbrook, and Houston would make quick work of them, with Houston winning in 5 games. And Harden averaged 33 points, 6 rebounds, and 7 assists, shooting 41% from the field and 24% from 3 in that series. In the second round, they would face the number 2 seed San Antonio Spurs, led by Kawhi Leonard. And in this very competitive series, the Spurs would win in 6 games, which included a Game 6 where the Spurs didn't have Kawhi Leonard, and Houston was down 3-2, and Harden would choke and have one of the worst games of his career, only scoring 10 points, shooting 2 for 11 from the field, and having 6 turnovers, and he fouled out. The Rockets would also lose that game by 39 points, and throughout the whole series, Harden wasn't that great, only putting up 24 points, 4 rebounds, and 9 assists, but shooting 41% from the field and 30% from 3. It was clear Harden needed a second star alongside him. In the 2017 offseason, the Rockets made one of the biggest moves of the decade, acquiring Chris Paul in a sign-and-trade that sent Patrick Beverley, Lou Williams, Sam Dekker, Montrezl Harrell, Deron Hillard, DeAndre Liggins, Kyle Widgeter, and a first-round pick to the LA Clippers. Initially, when this move was made, most questioned how Harden and Paul would fit together. The Rockets also signed PJ Tucker and Luke Mbah a Moute for defense. So overall, it was a very good offseason for Houston. In James Harden's 6th season in Houston, he led the Rockets to one of their best regular season records in franchise history, as they had a 65-17 record. And Harden was named the 2018 MVP, rightfully so, as he averaged 30 points per game, 9 assists, 5 rebounds, shooting 44% from the field and 36% from 3, while leading his team to the best record in the league. So it was clear the duo of Chris Paul and Harden worked. In the first round of the playoffs, they faced the 8th-seeded Timberwolves and defeated them quickly in 5 games. In the second round, they faced the number 5 seed Jazz, led by a rookie in Donovan Mitchell, and the Rockets defeated them quickly in 5 games as well. In the conference finals, they would face the juggernaut Warriors, who were fresh off winning the championship the previous year. And this was a very close series, as Houston would go up 3-2. But in Game 5, Chris Paul would get a hamstring injury, which gave the Warriors the momentum they needed to win the next 2 games and win the series in 7 games. But Houston was very much capable of winning both of those games, Game 6 and Game 7. As in going to Game 6, going into halftime, Houston had a 10-point lead, and in Game 7, Houston famously missed 27 3-pointers in a row, and yet they only lost by 9 points. So again, it felt like Houston had blown a chance to make it to the finals, and especially Harden, who averaged only 28 points, 5 rebounds, and 6 assists, shooting 41% from the field and 24% from 3. It's far from his best series, but overall it was a positive sign, since Houston proved that they could compete with the Warriors, which many other teams couldn't do. In the 2018 offseason, the Rockets lost 2 of their best defenders in Trevor Ariza and Luke Mbah a Moute. They re-signed Chris Paul and Clint Capella, and they also signed Carmelo Anthony, but they would cut him a few games into the season. But overall, this offseason was a slight L, as they lost some of their defense, which was a big key to them having a close series with the Warriors. In James Harden's 7th season in Houston, they had a worse record than they did the previous season, but they were still very good, having a 53-29 record, finishing with the 4th seed in the Western Conference. Harden this season had the 7th highest points per game average in history, as he put up 36 points per game, along with 7 assists and 6 rebounds, shooting 44% from the field and 36% from 3. And throughout the season, Houston was viewed as Golden State's biggest competition in the West. In the first round, they faced the number 5 seed Utah Jazz and defeated them in 5 games. And in the second round, for the second year in a row, they would be facing the Golden State Warriors, who were still a super team with their big 4 of Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, and Draymond Green. In Game 5 of that series, it was tied 2 games apiece, and in the midst of Game 5, Kevin Durant would go out with a leg injury and would be out for the rest of the series. And at the time of the injury, the game was close, and Houston could have easily stolen the game and won up 3-2. But Houston would lose the game largely due to James Harden only scoring 5 points in the 4th quarter and only taking 3 shots in the 4th quarter. Going into Game 7, everyone expected Houston to win, but Golden State would win and advance to the finals, led by Steph Curry's 33 points. This loss definitely wasn't Harden's fault, as he scored 35 points and had 12 points in the 4th quarter. Going into the offseason, most assumed Houston would make a significant move. In the 2019 offseason, there were many reports of a rift between James Harden and Chris Paul, so the Rockets decided to send Paul to the Thunder in exchange for Russell Westbrook, and the idea behind the move was that Russ is a younger and better CP3 who can make Houston better. In Harden's 8th season with Houston, the Rockets would have a very up and down season, and they would finish with a 44-28 record. And in the middle of the season, they would trade Clint Capella and acquire a small ball team that's tallest player was a 6'9" Robert Covington. And the ideology behind the move is that it would give Houston a lineup that could switch everything and have all 5 players be able to space the floor at the same time. This year, Harden had another impressive season, averaging 34 points, 6 rebounds, and 7 assists, shooting 44% from the field and 35% from 3. Going into the playoffs, the Rockets would face the number 5 seed OKC Thunder, and in a close series, Houston would win in 7 games. And in the second round, they would face the LA Lakers, who were led by LeBron James and Anthony Davis. And after Houston won Game 1 of the second round, there was a few who believed Houston could legitimately upset LA and advance to the conference finals, but the Lakers would figure them out and win the next 4 games in a row, winning the series in 5 games. In the series, Harden would average 29 points and 7 assists, shooting 50% from the field and 37% from 3. So it wasn't his fault that they lost, but going into the 2020 offseason, Houston looked like they had no plan. In the 2020 offseason, the Rockets were looking like they had no moves to make, but Russell Westbrook would suddenly request a trade, and Russ would eventually get traded to the Washington Wizards, and the Rockets would receive John Wall. Seeing the state that the team was in, Harden would request a trade, and Houston would take quite a while to move him, but 8 games into the regular season, they would finally move Harden to the Nets in a massive team move. The whole trade included Harden going to the Nets, Jarrett Allen and Taurean Prince to the Cavs, Karis LeVert and a 2nd-round pick to the Pacers, Victor Oladipo, Rodion Kurucs, Dante Exum, and 4 first-round picks to Houston, and that would end James Harden's run in Houston. But that catches us up to the current day, where Harden is on the Nets, making one of the best big threes in history on paper, and is looking to win a championship. To conclude, I believe Harden's career in Houston was very good, due to him leading to many winning seasons, but it's somewhat disappointing since he had many opportunities to lead them to a championship or at least the finals, and he had many series and big games where he disappointed and flat out choked, but overall, it was a good run. Anyways guys, that's it for the video. Let me know how good you think James Harden's career was in Houston. Drop a like on this video to help my channel grow. Subscribe to my channel to help me reach 700 subscribers before the end of January. And comment on this video to start a conversation with me because I respond to all of my comments. And I'm out.